again, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of English 101. Hopefully you have managed to navigate eCampus a little bit. Most of you are doing a good job of keeping up with the assignments already. I have graded your free writes and your discussion posts, and I've responded to everything that I've received so far. So a couple of notes before we begin today's lesson. I see that some of you are taking the avoiding plagiarism quizzes, which are in this section. You do not need to do this. You can do it to your heart's content, but I will not grade you on them. So if you don't have a lot of time, then you do not need to do any of these. This is just a resource the school provides, and again, I'm not going to be assigning them or grading them. Another thing to start with is whenever you see your grade, which I'm not going to pull it up because it would show everyone's grades. Whenever you see that grade, if you get a 1 out of 1, it means you have a completion. Okay, so that doesn't mean you have 100%. It just means that I have received it and I'm communicating with you. Yes, you turned it in on time. Good job. Okay, so let me know if you have questions about that. So what we're going to talk about for this first video, like yesterday, I'm going to do 2 videos, 15 minutes roughly each. And this first video is going to talk about Pact, P-A-C-T. It's an acronym that the Writing Studio uses and every English 101 and 102 course uses as well. So we're going to learn a little bit about that, and we're also going to start talking about rhetoric. So a few of you mentioned in your posts that you're kind of like intimidated by rhetoric or you don't really understand it. It's not going to be a huge part of this course, but we will be using the language of rhetoric to talk about the narrative paper, but more specifically the second paper, which is the rhetorical analysis paper, which, it says it right in the definition. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hop over to coursework, which has most all of the documents. And then under papers, which is where most of your readings are coming from, the reading you did for today, which I'll talk about that in the second video, the sample paper, and then we're going to talk about the rhetoric document. So the Pact document is new. I did not ask you to read it, but it's down here. It's faster for me to pull it up, already on my laptop. So basically, this was a document I created for the Writing Center. I'm a Writing Center consultant. It's describing literacy, written and reading literacy. So you don't need to really look at all of this stuff. The main thing I want you to focus on is this center here, Pact. So we'll be using this language of purpose, audience, conventions, trouble spots. So when you start thinking about your narrative paper, which your free write for today asks you about your theme and also your stories, and actually your homework for tonight will be your writing response 1, which is due at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Again, all of this is on the syllabus, and I will send an email. So as you're thinking about your theme and your stories for your narrative paper, think about these 4 things. First off, purpose. What do you want to happen? What's your goal for writing this? What emotion do you want the audience to feel? What triumph or failure, or what did you learn? What's your purpose? Okay, audience, who's reading, listening, or viewing. Technically, it's me, obviously, but think about, like I said in the first couple of videos, think about a theoretical audience. If you were to publish this on like BuzzFeed or a journal that's not necessarily an academic journal, because this genre of the narrative convention is not as academic as, say, a research paper. But who's reading it? Who are you trying to communicate with? Is it your peers? Is it your parents? How might you tell a story differently depending on the audience? The third one is conventions. What's expected in this context? So that's something like using first person. I want you to use first person. It only makes sense to use first person. So things like I, my, we, our. Avoid using second person, like I've mentioned before, because you normally mean, not technically me, you mean a larger audience. So just say people or readers or peers, whatever you technically mean there. Another convention is something like using storytelling elements. We'll get in the second video for today, we'll get into showing versus telling, and then pretty much all tomorrow we will focus on showing versus telling. Showing versus telling means description language or descriptive language. It means the five senses. It means you're creating a scene or a moment in time rather than telling me an entire lifetime of events. That's too much to compact into one paper. That's 1,200 to 1,500 words. The last one is trouble spots. What could get in the way of my goals? So this is normally for revision. A lot of you identified some of your trouble spots, aka your weaknesses, in your first free write. That was great. Keep trying to do that. So when you get to the final portfolio, you can not only have a lot to say in your reflective cover memo, but also you can work on fixing those trouble spots. Okay, so this document is online, but you don't really need to take a look at all of it, but you do have the Pact kind of logo here to remind you what that stands for. The second thing that we're going to take a look at today is rhetoric. So rhetoric is just kind of a big fancy word for using language to get people to do stuff. You're persuading an audience at all moments. Think about when you were a kid or living with your parents, or maybe you still live with your parents. Think about asking them for money. If you are asking them for money, you probably are not going to say, oh, I want money to go and party or to buy alcohol or whatever. You're probably going to say, oh, well, Mom, Dad, I need money because I have to buy books and my classes are so hard and I'm working really hard. You're keeping your audience in mind and you're persuading them. Okay, so rhetoric is very similar. You're just persuading different types of audiences using different types of papers. All right, so let's pull up the Rhetoric document, and this has a ton of words on it. I asked you to read this for today, and I'm going to try to break down these concepts as we'll be using them through this paper, the second paper, and like I said, I'm going to be referring to things like ethos, pathos, and logos, and I'm expecting you to know what I'm saying whenever I do refer to them. Okay, so let's just go in order, and please do let me know at any moment if you have questions about these concepts. Like I said, we're not going to be using them a lot in this course, but we'll be using them enough that if you don't understand the basis of them, you should ask. You can ask in a journal, you can ask in an email, or even a discussion post. The journals are private, so if I know some students have trouble asking questions, that's a perfect place to do it because only I will see it. Okay, logos. Let's save logos for last because logos to me is some of the most confusing one. So let's start with the easiest, pathos. Think about what you know about pathos before I kind of blurt out the answer or tell you the answer. What does pathos, where do you think it comes from? It's normally, these are all Greek Aristotelian concepts, but that's not really important. Pathos is all about emotion, and you're evoking an emotion from the audience. So it says exactly that down here. Appeals to the audience's emotions based on language and description, etc. So when you think about pathos, think about like, I always, as a bad example almost, I always use the Sarah McLachlan In the Arms of an Angel, those commercials that show starving animals. And yeah, I hope you're thinking of those right now, only to emphasize how strong good and bad pathos can be. So those might be an overuse of pathos, because I doubt you sit through the whole commercial and really watch that commercial and then donate money or donate time to their cause. So I would argue that is not an effective use of pathos. In your narrative paper, this first paper, pathos will be the most important appeal to use. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you can employ that in the show and telling sections. So ethos. Ethos in this paper, you've got it down because I'm asking you about your life. Ethos is the credibility of the author. So how trustworthy are you? When we get into the second two papers where I'm requiring you to do research, your ethos can more easily call into question because you are quoting others, you're taking other ideas into account. But ethos for this paper is your life, and you could lie in this paper. I hope you don't, but I will never really know. So your credibility is, unless you contradict yourself within the paper, your credibility is going to be pretty high in this paper. Okay, so now we're to logos, the last one. Logos is essentially, it's not necessarily logic, like symbolic logic or anything. It's kind of organization mixed with evidence. So it's how things are structured or arranged in a text. So it makes sense to have an introduction in the beginning, to have body paragraphs, and to have the conclusion. The organization or the outline that I provided for you guys, which we'll revisit in the next video, that is a strong use of logos. So that's one way. Organization is logos. The second way is evidence. So this relates to how your stories intertwine with your theme. If your theme is about loss of childhood, and then you tell stories about your success as a businessman, but you don't make a connection on the page to how that reflects loss of childhood, then your logical appeal will decrease. It will make less sense, essentially. Basically, these things must work together in a logical order, and they have to have evidence, which says right here. Okay? So that's pretty much for rhetoric. There are a ton of other things to discuss with rhetoric. I mean, people write entire books and have PhDs in this stuff. But for the purposes of this class, we're only going to stick to these three. And over time, I believe you'll become more comfortable with these terms if you're not already comfortable with them. So these three make up the rhetorical triangle. So if I ever refer to the rhetorical triangle or the appeals, that's what these are. Okay? Just so you're familiar with this language. All right. So this video is going to be a little bit shorter. I don't have much more to say about that. The next video, we're going to jump into showing versus telling. We're going to look at the sample paper. We're going to revisit organization, and I'm going to emphasize what homework you have for Wednesday. All right, so stick around for the next video.